Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you very much for making time for this panel. Hopefully we're going to be interesting and provocative. So we're here to talk about new models and what's next and what's happening. So let's get into it. Where should we start? I would like to start 4 decades ago, where I started my career in media, and I had a big calculator on my desk, big jumbo buttons, with one of those paper things. Do you remember those that spat out of the top so you could check your edition? Manually calculating cost per thousands, cost per tarps, and using the same set of reach curves to figure out what the hell we might deliver in market, because we had no clue whether our media activity generated sales or not. Fast forward 4 decades, we still have cost per thousands, we still have cost per tarps, we still have GRPs, and we have a whole basket of proxy metrics that supposedly help us understand what sells and what doesn't sell. So, fortunately, we now have platforms like GrowthOS that help disentangle that mess and help us to understand how discrete channels, activities, creative messages, etc. do generate growth. So I'm very curious to understand from your perspectives what's changing with the models that you're engaged with your customers. How is that affecting how budgets are set, how strategies are determined, how media is transacted and measured within your organisations for them? So that's a big topic. Who would like to go first?
Sure.
You're to my right. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I think, as always, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach for everybody. We actually spoke about that in our prep. Depending on the categories you're in, it goes back to the most basic investment principle, which is the IPA, brands, demand, conversion, generating activity. If you're in retail, the lower level funnel, there's going to be more people in category. You're more likely to nudge people into a purchase buying moment. If you're in a longer buying cycle category, it's slower results, longer brand building. So if you're at the slower ends, your triple M's like Mutinex play a much bigger role in justifying those long-term effects. If you're in retail, then you can sort of see the tills turn over as the ultimate metric with more of a short-term measure. But I think, each industry has its own variability based on the buying cycle.
And is that changing for your clients over time? I mean, obviously you're relatively new in your current gig, but you've been around a while.
I think the biggest difference is the brands that are right at the end of the funnel, they're very switched on around what works. I remember 15 years ago working on Foxtel, and they would say if, like most people I'm sure, who's worked on Foxtel at some point, I'm sure half the room, you might remember that they would say if the phones don't ring by Wednesday, the campaign failed. We wouldn't do pre-testing, we wouldn't worry about tracking, because if the sales didn't come in, it was down to the offer and the campaign. We got more sophisticated over time, in that instance, understanding what offers and framing, but that was more of a message than looking at channel effectiveness. You kind of fast forward to today, and I think what we have with Mutinex and other triple M's gives us longer term confidence in the role of brands in driving businesses forward, and I think gives that metric to boards that don't have that outcome. But you take the other side of the fence, you take a Maya, which we also work on, like the campaign goes live, and if you don't see the tills turn over the next day, you know that something's wrong. So what we now have is a great granularity, as everybody's aware of, trying to understand the diagnostics of why that behaviour is happening.
Cool. Okay, what's changing in Omnicom?
That's a different question. I think to build on what Chris said, we took what you were doing 30 years ago, all of us were doing 30 years ago, and we just the data started coming in, and we started sort of building more data on top of more data and looking at different ways of measuring it. We never actually went back and went, what's the process, what's the organisational design? A lot of the way customers still work with us is something they were doing 30 years ago for PO signatures, putting a budget in place, how are we thinking about channels? We've never said, what's the change management that's being driven by all this new data and signals that come back to us? So now, and you asked a question in the prep around, is it category or client? I'm with Chris, it varies by business. It's almost forcing the business to look in at itself, and how do we as an agency or any agency help support that? Because the question is, are you ready to make decisions every 24 hours? is that the pace at which your business moves? Will you reallocate budgets? How do you feel about this platform's giving you this level of optimization, this platform's giving you this, and there's no connector between the two? Do you have the right capability and organizational design to use the data that is now available, whether that be Growth OS, whether it be measurement from our business or someone else? How does that operate within your organization, as opposed to saying to the same group of people working within the same process, here's a completely new way of looking at the world? And I think that's something we've got to, is bubbling really to the top at the moment, hence the title here. It's around what's the model for growth? And the model is not just the media you buy or the measurement solution you pick. It is, what is your organizational model internally and with the partners you choose to work with?
But if you had to put a figure on it, to be provocative, what percentage of your clients would you say are legitimately connecting your activities to proper growth signals?
Hard question. I would say we've got some fantastic ones like Telstra, who've really changed at a phenomenal rate over the last 2 years. Sometimes we have occasional marketing teams who aren't even allowed to sell the sales data that's generated within their business. Now, those businesses are going to fail over time, but it's how they've been organised, and that's the view of the business. So I would say it's still quite a small percentage, but it needs to rapidly change. And people recognise it through different signals, whether it's I want a new model, or I want to engage with a new measurement partner, or I need to understand why this isn't working, or I can't answer the question on my board. All those different things actually ladder back to, are we organised properly for the market we live in today? And I think most people would say they are not.
Okay. We might circle back to that if we've got a bit of time. Mike, you guys are all about evolving the model and new thinking.
Firstly, I'll say that 4 decades ago, I was at junior school learning to add up, so...
Were you really?
Yes, he was. Not to make you feel old, John.
Yeah.
Look, I think from my perspective, having that intelligence in your business is certainly better than not. And I think at its base level, it should be influencing your strategy through to your planning, through to your buying, and the difference maker it can provide at that stage is quite significant. Where it really pays off is where it's broader in the business. So doubling down on what KK said, I've been in a business where sales are down on the week. The CEO is asking how much media they have in market, and they've got a really clear distinction between knowing the media is driving revenue for the business. And that, it's a multi-billion-dollar company, and I've been in another multi-billion-dollar company where they're not asking any questions of the media, and you suddenly realise that being that first one is a real privilege in your ability to actually influence what's happening on a day-to-day basis in a big business. So I think getting buy-in at a boardroom and at a C-suite level is critical for whether you've got M&M models or other measurement capabilities. But the other point I would say is that it's the people that you can bring into the room. So it's not just around media, it's e-com, it's product. If you've got the right tools in place, whether it's Mutinex or other M&M model, that should be a business-wide capability. And if you've got that in-house capability to then broaden the conversation beyond marketing, beyond media, it can be much more of a force for power and for good in the kind of decision-making that's made. But I would agree at the stage that the conversation in the industry is probably bigger than the reality of who's doing it, who's delivering it, who's able to draw it back to business metrics. And
So what percentage would you put it on from your perspective? Still small?
well, we've done a survey of in-house capabilities in Australia. Recently, 33% of those have got market mix models. So it's a reasonable size. How many of those are then tying that back? I think there's a broader number who have an ambition and optimistic about delivering a broader measurement solution that will tie it back to business outcomes, but they're not there yet. So I think they're building that capability, and I certainly think if you've got the right people internally to be able to translate that, whether it's an analytics team or the right people in the marketing team, they'll have more of an impact. But I still think we're at, to your point, a hard one to put a number on, but certainly still at relatively early stages.
Well, hopefully it accelerates soon. Speaking of acceleration, let's talk about agility. Certainly it's been decades now with marketers and everybody talking about the need to move faster. don't need to tell everybody in this room that the world's moving at a crazy pace and no one can keep up with it. Have the way your team's been working become more agile? Obviously, AI would be an enabler for that. And could you talk about what percentage of budgets are legitimately being re-optimised more dynamically and in real time versus what they used to be?
Well, I'm going to start with some optimism. I'm really lucky. I've got less clients than these two. But I think to your question you asked before, I think 95% are linking media to their business performance.
Excellent. And
I think, so that comes to your point around agility. I saw Terry here in the room. There's Terry. Terry's up here later from Honda. Honda don't get the leads on Monday. It changes the plan on Tuesday. And, Maya's the same. Qantas even the same. I think, maybe to Kristiaan's point, if you're not doing those things, it's a jungle out there. It's very hard. Like, who's finding it hard at the moment, like economically, to get the sales, to get the budgets to stretch? So the agility, I think, comes into a couple of things, and maybe you asked for provocation around this panel. We talk about transparency and the ability to move things, but the whole industry is shifting heavily and hard to principle. So with that movement, people that are opting for that model are, essentially investing in a trading model where there is commitments on that inventory, and can you move it with the pace and the velocity that you'd hope so? I think coming back to your question around AI in the optimization, unless you're using, we have a client where it's we scrape competitor. They're a price proposition. We scrape competitor sites every hour. That changes the bidding strategy every hour because they've got a price advantage. That's the only example of live AI that we do outside of what you'd optimize in platform. So I think to Kristiaan made a great point before, is that the process enables the change. So again, Terry might talk about this later, but like there is a process around how that budget can be optimized and what can't be optimized. But yeah, I think there's almost like bigger things to be concerned about. And I guess just before I hand it over, I think the biggest provocation I would give to the room is just what's the effective reach of your campaigns? Sort of talk a lot about like measuring it and then figuring out how to pivot. But if I think just a simple calculation, if you kind of go, am I only reaching 15% of the TAM with this campaign? Does really what I measure after it matter? Because I'm kind of talking to nobody. So I think it always comes back to, not everybody has enough budget to do everything they want. Even Brent, you were talking about Telstra, one of the things Brent would love is more money, right? To do more things. But then it comes down to choices.
Good point. We'll come back to principal media because it's a hot topic. Coco, do you want to talk about the agility question first?
I think the agility question, I'll go back a step. The conversation we look to have with our customers is, what are the principles by which you want to run your marketing? Because you're going to be asked to make an enormous amount of decisions every day, every week, every month for, let's say, the next 12 months, 18 months. Do you understand what you're doing and why? If we see short-term opportunity in the market, are you optimizing to that? Or are you going to stick with, say, what your measurement model says? Or have you got a brand strategy that will take longer to flow through? What are you trying to achieve? How are you measuring it? And how will react based on those numbers that you get? There's not enough conversation, I think, around what is your North Star and how do you structure your decision-making around achieving that North Star, as opposed to, I've been given a new piece of information, I must react to it. So it varies. So to Chris's point, we have a business called Flywheel that's completely integrated with Amazon. You can optimize by the minute. Phenomenal. If you sell goods on Amazon, it is a phenomenal piece of software, and it drives sales, and it's linked directly to how many units did you ship through Amazon, which is wonderful, but it exists in a closed ecosystem. The vast majority of broad media spend is not in that position. So I think agility has increased significantly. I think the agility of marketing teams, despite being under pressure, has increased significantly. I think technology has been a great enabler of that. Platforms, Trade Desk are here today, the Googles, etc., enable us to do more than we have done before. People do get lost sometimes, though, in why they are doing what they are doing, and is that actually achieving the goal they set out for at the beginning of the month or the beginning of the quarter. So again, I'm kind of a first principles guy. Our teams having the right conversations at the beginning fundamentally matters. And to Chris's point, you can be optimizing to the minute, or you might be optimizing to the quarter. And we're comfortable doing both as long as we're all agreed that's what is right for the brand and business.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Mike?
Yeah, I think for me, and again, looking at it kind of from the in-housing point of view, from my time in there, agility for me is how quickly you can go from decision made to speed to market. And the more parts of the process there are, the more links in that process, the slower it is. So yes, we've got the tools to be able to do a lot of the optimization and the agility. Do you have the right resource in place to be able to deliver that? And how quickly can that translate from decision made, whether it's a boardroom level or a marketing level, through to actually activating? And I think there's varying degrees along that spectrum. I think the AI thing's really interesting. See, it's already been adopted at relatively low-level tasks at the moment. I think more broadly than probably people realise. Having said that, I think we just need to be careful that the efficiency carrot doesn't outweigh the effectiveness kind of outcome opportunity you're kind of talking around. And I sort of look at sort of way our industry's going at the moment, and particularly some of the broader holdcos. Feels like we're moving towards a point of commoditization of media plans rather than where that human capability comes in, and strategy and planning, and how do we make sure that utilization of AI and the tools that are available don't just then override our ability to put genuine insight, genuine thought into what we're doing, and don't end up with five category owners with exactly the same media plans. I think that's the danger we need to be really aware of.
Okay, cool. Just to switch it up a bit, I want to talk about remuneration models versus operating models for a second. The industry has been desperate for a long time to be paid on value versus head hours, commissions, and all the other bullshit that we've used to try and get paid fairly over time. Doesn't matter whether you're an industry leader or sitting on industry boards, which I've done many times. And it feels like the opportunity to actually do that was always stunted by the lack of independent growth metric that everybody could agree on was fair to sort of judge what that REM looks like. Now, finally, with a platform like Growth OS, is this the opportunity for that to happen? Because you could argue that principal media wouldn't have gotten to the position it had people been fairly remunerated in the first place, and had holding companies not had to find creative ways to generate new revenues. Controversial, possibly. Reality, absolutely. You started talking about principal media. Do you want to share your experience and where it's at?
Yeah, look, let me answer your first question first around remuneration. A relationship has to be based on trust. So I'm a really big believer in sharing clients exactly what our margin is, exactly what we're making, so that if we need to have a reasonable conversation around workload, we can have that and scale up or scale down. Mm-hmm. I think the biggest risk that's happening in our industry at the moment, and principal media being the key, is that that's not transparent. If you're not in a transparent relationship, how does that build trust? I think one of the scariest things that are happening is, we've seen it with a couple of the holding companies, is that the creative's now been done for free because the principal media deal on that client can, like that's insane. Like that, what a lack of transparency. Then let's go to the next bit. It's often talked about, we should get paid for the value we create. Do we also pay up when we fuck up? Like that's the other side of that coin. You know, we get really, you know, as colleagues in this industry, we get paid really well. You know, compare that to teachers, nurses, doctors, police. You know, like we get paid really well. And I think there is a motivation often for us to want to be recognised for more than maybe what our contribution is. There are multiple P's in the marketing mix. We generally control one of them. Even when we have all the measurement, we control one of them. We don't control the economic conditions, the competitive set, the pricing strategy, rarely. Do you know what I mean? So there is a moment, I think, occasionally, of humility of the component that we do. And for sure, build PBR into those components, build incentive stretches, but like within the realms of what we can control. And then be prepared to also get paid nothing if it doesn't work.
The brave thing to do, but also reality. But you've given that the models like ours now and others are disentangling economic factors and specific campaigns and specific tactics. Do you not believe then that there is a currency that could more fairly compensate you for the value you create?
Maybe. I've sat in plenty of boardrooms where it's all lined up and then something happens. A pricing change that's come from global, the first 3 weeks of sales didn't happen, so that slashed the price. Like it's no one can control all the levers of the economy. On the rarest occasion, maybe we can. I talked about that example before where we work for this client, no one knows their brand, they're 150 million e-commerce business because they essentially sell camping equipment and four-wheel drive parts on a SKU level cheaper than everybody else. So there is nothing else driving that apart from the ability to bid in that search and convert it better through the funnel than anybody else. On that, we're on a 100% PBR model. We break their profit number, we get a share of incremental profit. The first year we did it, it didn't work. We didn't get paid anything. In year 2, it's working really well. But no one can run a sustainable business with potentially 100% of your clients either paying you 1 year or not paying you 1 year.
Fair enough. Well, clock's ticking down. I better let you guys input on this important topic.
I think the model, ultimately everyone wants to link as closely as possible to sales. So whether you've got media proxies, whether you're using a measurement platform in the middle, you're still somewhat away from, I did this, it generated this sale. So I think we're still on that long journey. General point, smaller businesses are better at connecting those things because they can talk to their CFO, they can talk to their head of legal about how you can look at the sales data. To Chris's point, agencies have always been able to say, I will put X of my fee at risk based on what your sales performance is or your share price performance is. We have some customers where it's not the growth in sales, it's the share price that they as a business are KPI'd on. So is that what we're being asked to, as our key KPI? Because that's what the CMOs is, or the CEOs. So I think it varies. Ultimately, everyone is moving along that journey, but all we really want to get to is, can I directly link this to sales? Which many businesses can do if they're platform-based, like Chris has said. So, principal inventory. Talked about a lot. Generally by people who have never used the product, built the product, and have any understanding of the product. There are a wide variety of models within principal inventory. They were originally started by independent businesses. So Active International, Astus are 2 examples of that. I think when you talk about principal inventory, which we do a lot with clients, I think it really, again, first principles guy, goes back to what's the model. Is principal inventory more opaque than your traditional media buying? There is absolutely no reason why it can't be or should be. Traditional media can be far more opaque than principal inventory. When we think about principal inventory, the model Omnicom has, you see everything down to the spot level. So from a Mutinex perspective, or from any other measurement product perspective, it has 0 impact. Our model, we don't actually buy inventory, which is kind of ironic considering the name. I don't know if others do. I think it would be a very risky thing to do. I think there's a real complexity that people don't necessarily understand. Ultimately, it comes down to, can you help a customer make an informed choice? If they're comfortable and you can explain how you manage that, then you're in a good spot. That is also true of the team you give them, the traditional media buying you may do for them, how you work with a platform. All of those things have the same principles underneath them. They're not in separate parts of the room, or they certainly shouldn't be. So I think when we look at how, and we're biased because we're a media agency, or I work in a media agency, when normally a client's talking to us, 90% of the spend that they will be giving us is in media, and well under 10% will be on the people we employ. Generally, the time is inverse. It's 90% on the people in the team and 10% on the media. Media has got incredibly complex. New channels appear, new platforms appear, but there is not enough time spent on discussing, outside of the room, what capability do you have and what do you outsource? Is my 90% going to be outsourced to other people to buy the video, to do the search, or are you buying it? There's nothing wrong with either way of doing it. It's more, do you understand what is happening with your money and why? We have had conversations with customer where we've gone, we're 2 hours into a negotiation. We've got half an hour left. We haven't actually talked about how we buy the media for you. And it's 90 cents in the dollar in this room. And it's tough. It's so complex. It's not something people are comfortable with. So for me, principal inventory, bundled media. So we don't do anything that's bundled. If you buy a bundled media product, you can't use Mutinex particularly well. You can build proxies for it, back to proxies. Same for our measurement tools, same for everyone else. It's bundled media sometimes gets put with principal inventory. They're fundamentally different products. Bundled media, I would suggest, is a bigger problem for customers in the media marketplace today than any other product, because it doesn't allow you to understand where your performance was. It doesn't allow you to optimize that in the following month. But again, these are separate things. These are complex conversations that the industry has created over time. And I think it's a conversation that should be had more broadly. I think it's one that customers should feel far more confident talking to agencies, media owners, tech providers, and going, what do you do in all of these different spaces? And more importantly, what are the same principles you apply to every single one? That doesn't happen very much. You know, some of the stuff said in the trade press, if you buy principal inventory, you don't know what you bought. I can only speak for our model. That is fundamentally not true. We work with Mutinex. We have a number of clients who principal inventory. All of that inventory goes into the model. All of it gets to be seen. Everyone gets to understand. So for me, complex conversation comes back to first principles, comes back to what is it you're trying to achieve and why, and can you measure it? If you can't measure at the impression level, why are you buying that product? I don't have a single product that you cannot measure at an impression level so that you can work out whether you want to buy it again next month, want to buy 3 of them next month, or don't ever want to buy it again. Any product that can't achieve that first question, treat with suspicion, whether it is sold by the agency or by their media partner or tech partner they have bought in the room. So, yeah, as you can tell, I could talk about this for a long time.
We can all talk about it for a long time, and we're out of time, but I just want to give Mike a quick opportunity to express his thoughts before we wind up.
That's all right. It was a very solid defense of your principal media trade-in. Look, I would say a couple of things, because I know we're out of time. There's no greater transparency. I mean, you bring that capability in-house. So simply put, if you've got the capability in-house, you're not worried. You're not having to worry about opaque media models or agency kind of remuneration. Having said that, the overwhelming majority of in-house agencies, if you like, are in a hybrid model. So we're still working with those teams to figure out how to work with their agencies and what the right processes are in place and how to structure their contracts. And I agree with Chris on this. You know, having that risk and reward approach is definitely the better incentive. I think too many contracts now are based on, if you do a great job, we'll give you the whole fee rather than taking 15% off if you don't hit certain targets. That's not really an incentive at all. So I think there's definitely room to improve kind of some of the basic approaches to remuneration. I think in terms of the trading piece, you know, I've seen both sides of it. So I've been in an agency where it's completely a black box and you have to sign your life away to access it, and then you just get what you get. Other models, a bit more open, and you do get to see the level of inventory. I think the critical point is the point KK made at the end. You've got to have full visibility of what you're buying, what you're understanding, and brands can't abdicate responsibility as well for the accountability of their media. I think even if you go into a model where it is risk and reward, it doesn't mean that you abdicate responsibility completely to the agency and say, well, if you don't deliver, then that's zero, because you simply can't control all those inputs. And half the time, I think brands are telling agencies to do certain things that agencies wouldn't necessarily want to do, and it's going against the grain of their advice. So you've got to have a level of transparency, and you've got to have a level of accountability, I think, for the model to work properly. Perfect. Okay, we are well and truly out of time. We could talk for much longer, but we can't. Thank you so much for joining us, and thanks for your insights. Thanks for your attention, everyone.